Beijing vows to take resolute and forceful measures in response to the U.S. House Speaker's meeting with Tsai Ing-wen in California. President Xi Jinping meets with visiting French leader Emmanuel Macron. And Poland gives Ukraine more military hardware as Volodymyr Zelensky visits Warsaw. Hello and welcome to TVB News. Taiwan leader Tsai Ing-wen held high-profile talks with U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy in California, despite threats from Beijing. They met at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley, where Tsai stressed the need for accelerated arms deliveries to the island. In response, Beijing said it would take resolute and forceful measures to defend national sovereignty and territorial integrity. Matthew Bray reports.
Tsai Ing-wen made the stopover in California after visits to two Central American nations. She met Republican and Democratic lawmakers in a bipartisan show of support at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley, California. McCarthy is the most senior American figure to meet a Taiwanese leader in America since 1979. The meeting comes at a time of pretty poor U.S.-China relations, but McCarthy said the friendship between Taiwan and America was a matter of profound importance to the free world.
We will honor our obligations and reiterate our commitment to our shared values, behind which all Americans are united.
McCarthy said the United States needs to maintain arms sales to Taiwan and that those deliveries arrive on time. The meeting was arranged in McCarthy's home state and planned to try and avoid unnecessary reaction from China. When former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan in August last year, it provoked large-scale live firing drills around the island, including firing a missile over Taiwan. The Pentagon played down the significance of Tsai's transit.
China shouldn't use this visit as a pretext in any way to increase any aggressive activity around the Taiwan Strait. I mean, these transits are routine. The transit is consistent with our One China policy. And again, this is not an official visit.
In Beijing, a foreign ministry spokesperson said the US and Taiwan are colluding with each other, using transit as a pretext to condone Taiwan independent separatists to engage in political activities in the United States. She said China would take resolute and strong measures to firmly defend national sovereignty and territorial integrity. Matthew Bray, TVB News.
A Chinese aircraft carrier was in the Taiwan Strait following the meeting of U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and Taiwan leader Tsai Ing-wen. The carrier was roughly 370 kilometers off Taiwan's east coast, the Taiwanese defense minister told the parliament in Taipei. Later, the vessel moved to the east of the southern tip of Taiwan. It is being monitored at a distance of 5 to 6 nautical miles by Taiwanese warships. The carrier is accompanied by a frigate and a support ship. A Japanese warship is also monitoring the carrier group. President Xi Jinping met with visiting French President Emmanuel Macron in Beijing today. Macron is on for a 3-day state visit to the mainland at the invitation of the Chinese leader. She said both countries have the ability and responsibility to overcome their differences. Macron, meanwhile, expressed hope that China will use its influence to resolve the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Jackie Lin reports.
President Xi Jinping greeted his guest, French President Emmanuel Macron, outside the Great Hall of the People this afternoon. The two leaders watched a march past at the Guard of Honor of the People's Liberation Army. During their meeting, Xi said Macron is the first European leader to visit China after the two sessions gathering, and his visit is set to inject new momentum into Sino-European relations.
中法作为
She stressed China and France both being independent great powers, as well as permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, have the ability and responsibility to safeguard world peace and prosperity. An even more explicit call to action on the Ukraine war from Macron. The French president told his Chinese counterpart that he knows he can count on Xi to bring Russia back to reason and back to the negotiating table. Xi and Macron will sign bilateral agreements on trade and climate change. The pair are expected to hold a three-way meeting with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Von der Leyen is invited by Macron to join the visit to show European solidarity. Before being received by Xi, Macron met with State Councillor and Foreign Minister Qin Gang. The French leader will also have a sit-down with Zhao Leji, chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress. On Friday, the last day of Macron's China trip, he will travel south to Guangzhou. It's understood Xi will meet with Macron again in the southern city. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
Poland and Ukraine solidified their cooperation in the face of what they call Russian aggression, as Volodymyr Zelensky visited Warsaw. He thanked Poland for being crucial in helping to secure weapons. Poland pledged more MiG fighter jets to help Zelensky in the war. David Garrett reports.
Everybody needs good neighbours. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky crossed the border visiting Poland. He and his wife Elena drove towards Warsaw's presidential palace in a rare pre-announced trip out of Ukraine. They were greeted warmly by Polish President Andrzej Duda, the pair united in defiance of Russia. As the wives of each leader looked on, Zelensky was awarded the Order of the White Eagle, Poland's oldest and highest civilitary distinction. Poland had been full of praise for Zelensky's stance since the beginning of the war with Russia in February last year. As the applause subsided, it was time to talk. In a joint briefing, Zelensky called his trip a visit of thanks. It is essential for Poland to be one of our main partners in reconstructing, he said. He then spoke about the situation in Bakhmut, where he said there was a shortage of artillery shells. Poland had been a key supporter since the start of the war. It was the first country to pledge Leopard 2 tanks to help Ukraine. Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, alongside Zelensky at a ceremonial handover, confirmed Poland would provide 100 armoured personnel carriers, or APCs, to Ukraine. Production is funded by the European Union. Morawiecki had earlier called it a good day for Polish industry. The Polish president announced more significant military assistance. 4 MiG-29s that remained in storage have been handed over to the Ukrainian armed forces in recent months. 4 MiGs are now being given, so 8 in total, said Duda. He also said Poland is ready to give 6 more that are currently being prepared. Crowds grew in Warsaw as Zelensky publicly thanked Duda and Poland for their continued support. Ukrainian and Polish hearts beat the same for freedom, for our dear Europe, for our common home, said Zelensky. David Garrett, TVB News.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has told the U.S. and EU ambassadors that their countries were responsible for a dramatic deterioration in relations since Russia sent its armed forces into Ukraine last year. Putin also accused Western intelligence agencies of helping Ukraine mount acts of sabotage aimed at scaring the local population. And the president of Belarus is on a 2-day visit to Moscow. Tracy Furness has more.
Speaking at a ceremony where he accepted diplomatic credentials from ambassadors of 17 states, Vladimir Putin told U.S. Ambassador Lynn Tracy that U.S. support for a revolution in Ukraine in 2014 led to the current situation where Russia and Ukraine are in conflict. Putin told Tracy the use by the United States of such tools as support for the so-called color revolutions, support for the coup d'etat in Kiev in 2014 in its foreign policy, ultimately led to the current Ukrainian crisis and additionally made a negative contribution to the degradation of Russia-US relations. During a video call, with the Kremlin Security Council, which of the 4 Ukrainian regions that Moscow annexed last year. Putin charged Western intelligence agencies of being instrumental in helping Ukraine mount acts of sabotage and terrorism aimed at scaring the local population. He urged his officials to mount a stronger response. Several Moscow-appointed officials in the newly incorporated regions have been killed and wounded in a slew of bombings and other attacks. Putin also welcomed Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko to Moscow on Wednesday. Lukashenko is there for 2 days of talks, but in their opening remarks, both men steered clear of the conflict in Ukraine. The two leaders will discuss Lukashenko's call for an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine. Last month, Putin said Russia would deploy tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
The foreign ministers of Iran and Saudi Arabia have met in Beijing for the first formal meeting of the country's top diplomats in more than 7 years. It came after China brokered a deal last month to restore ties between the regional rivals. Counterparts Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud and Hossein Amir Abdullahian shook hands and exchanged signed memorandums of understanding in the presence of Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang. Saudi Arabia and Iran said they would launch arrangements to reopen embassies and consulates within the 2-month period stipulated in the deal last month. The two countries will also continue to expand cooperation, including resuming flights and facilitating visas for citizens. Still ahead, Disney Cruise Line decides to make Singapore its home port instead of Hong Kong. Police arrest a youngster on suspicion of trying to drive away a bus. And former Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi is in the hospital. Sources say he's suffering from leukemia. Welcome back. Disney Cruise Line has decided to make Singapore its home port instead of Hong Kong. With much of the world having returned to post-COVID normalcy, cruise tours are experiencing a resurgence in numbers. But some major cruise lines have chosen to base themselves in Singapore instead of the SAR, signaling a possible dent in the city's image among travelers. Voices among Hong Kong's tourism sector said they wish the authorities would roll out additional policies to promote the city as an attractive home port for cruises. Timothy Lee reports.
Cruise tours, which were seriously affected by the COVID pandemic, are gradually returning since the city returned to normalcy. At least 16 cruise lines have confirmed that they will return to the Hong Kong market this year and will provide more than 150 cruise tours. 5 such cruise lines will also make the city their home port. However, Disney Cruise Line has decided it will make Singapore its new home port instead of the SAR. It will be the first time a Disney cruise ship has an Asia-based home port. Jeff Bentz, managing director of Worldwide Cruise Terminals, said perhaps the company does not want to place all their eggs in one basket and is simply spreading their resources, as Disney already has a theme park in Shanghai. He added that many new cruise ships have shifted to using liquefied natural gas as their source of fuel, and that the city must make rapid developments in that regard in order to compete. A tourism academic believes that international cruise lines have largely avoided calling Hong Kong home because of the city's late return to normalcy. Meanwhile, some from the city's travel agencies have urged the government to roll out more policies to attract cruise companies to return to Hong Kong, including allowing cruise ships to moor in the city at a discount. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
A hospital authority manager and her husband have been found guilty of supermarket theft. The defendants, Hospital Authority Chief Manager Vivian Chuang Wai Man and Chu Mingyu, a doctor, appeared in Kowloon City Magistrates Court this afternoon. They were accused of stealing items, including fruit and sushi, from a supermarket in Whampoa in April last year. They pleaded not guilty. The magistrate said the pair had scanned some items to pay selectively, but they did not pay for items worth over $1,600. Hence, they were considered to have had dishonest intentions. Vivian Chuang previously hosted daily COVID-19 press briefings during the pandemic. The Hong Kong Ice Hockey Association is embroiled in a controversy after a protest movement-related song was played instead of the national anthem at a sporting event in Bosnia involving the Hong Kong team. Lobo Louis, an academic in sporting science, said the issue came about from problems involving decisions by the leaders and members of the delegation. A Hong Kong team member said he hopes the public will focus more on the sporting aspects, as the athletes worked hard to achieve the result. Mimo Singhai tells us more.
In February, the Hong Kong ice hockey team was in Bosnia to compete at the Ice Hockey World Championship. After achieving a third-place finish, a song associated with the 2019 anti-government protests was played at the ceremony instead of the national anthem, leading to a series of actions by the Hong Kong government and various sporting organizations. What do the athletes, such as Yang Zhenying, a member of the Hong Kong ice hockey team, think?
We feeling so sad about that because we train so hard. In Hong Kong, there's a lot of ice time for ice hockey team. Even kids, they don't really have enough ice time for practice, for game, for league game. So it's tough for Hong Kong players in Hong Kong. It's train hard. So like me as a Hong Kong ice hockey player, I have to train at 10:30, evening, at night until 12.
After the incident, Hong Kong Ice Hockey Association was requested to submit a supplementary report to explain the incident. In response to the blunder, the manager of the Hong Kong team, Annie Guan, said she had the correct version of the anthem, but she could not find an organizer after winning the match that day. Guan said it was only when the ceremony was about to start that the organizer turned up. The association apologized 3 times in its report, saying it has learned a lesson. The HKIHA suggested some improvement solutions, such as forbidding athletes to enter the arena until the national anthem is checked, or the USB with the correct version of the anthem is handed over. The association said the USB was only received by the organizer after the blunder to ensure no further mistakes would occur. Bosnia and Herzegovina Ice Hockey Federation, meanwhile, acknowledged it had received a USB with the right version of the national anthem from the Hong Kong team. The federation added it would take full responsibility. The Sports Federation and Olympic Committee earlier said it had initiated suspension proceedings against the HKIHA. HKIHA will need to submit a full explanation next month. Mimo Singhai, TVB News.
Police arrested a male youth early today on suspicion of boarding a bus that was parked in Aberdeen and attempting to drive it away. At around 1 a.m., the 17-year-old called the police himself, saying an accident occurred while he was trying to drive a city bus vehicle. Officers arrived at the scene and found a damaged bus with its front crashed into railings. Police arrested the youth on suspicion of taking conveyance without authority, driving without a valid driving license, and driving without third-party insurance. And that is the news. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the holiday tomorrow.